Welcome. It's the 90 Seconds Handicapper here. We are 6 days out from UFC 264. So today I was going to use my advanced statistical spreadsheet to break down the co-main event between Stephen Thompson and Gilbert Burns. So let's go ahead, let's get started. Starting with the tail of the tape, we can see that Stephen Thompson is 4 years older at 38. He's 2 inches taller at 6 feet, and he has a reach advantage of 4 inches. Moving on to octagon time, what jumps out at me here is the fact that both fighters have 3 hours worth of fight time. Um, I don't think that the 33 additional minutes that Stephen Thompson has over Gilbert Burns is really going to matter in this particular fight. Both guys are pretty seasoned; they're veteran fighters. So I don't think that one fighter has an advantage over the other in terms of octagon time. Moving to UFC record, as we can see, both fighters both have 16 total fights. Gilbert Burns has one more win. Both have equal amount of losses. Stephen Thompson has one draw, and of course that draw was against Tyron Woodley when he fought for the when he was fighting Woodley for the title. Looking at the winning percentage, Burns has a higher winning percentage with that win at 75 versus Thompson's 69. Really, in the first three sections, taking a look, the only advantage that I see in these first three sections would be right here for the 4-inch reach advantage, and we'll actually talk about that later when we talk about the striking and grappling metrics. Other than that, let's move on to the next. Let's talk about quality of opponents. So quality of opponents here. So real quickly, what this is going to measure is it's going to measure. We'll take Stephen Thompson for the example here. It's going to measure anyone Stephen Thompson has fought. It's going to measure that opponent's wins and losses and their opponent's wins and losses. And so beat rating is just going to measure the ones who Stephen Thompson has wins over. And then for the loss to rating, it's only going to measure the fighters who have wins over Stephen Thompson. So again, it's going to measure that fighter as well as that fighter's other opponents. And it's going to spit back a number, and that's going to be their rating. And now digging back, go ahead and dig into this category here. So we can see that Gilbert Burns actually has the advantage. He has 61.1 for the overall opponent rating, beat rating at 60.1, and then the loss to rating is 63.1. Now, with all that being said, just like kind of over here where we talked about octagon time, Thompson having the advantage in time. Gilbert Burns has an advantage here in terms of quality opponents. I really don't think it's going to matter in this case. And I say that because it's your typical striker versus grappler matchup. This will be the best grappler Stephen Thompson would have faced to date. It will also be the best striker Gilbert Burns has faced to date. So I don't think that, again, quality of opponents is really going to come into play. So moving on, we're going to skip over method percentage, and we're going to move on to the last three opponents. So the last three opponents, really why I bring this in, it's just a way to gauge how a fighter is trending coming into the fight. And as we can see, both fighters are 2-1 in their last three. The only difference is that Gilbert Burns has that loss against Kamaru Usman, which was for the welterweight championship. And that was by TKO. I think for Gilbert Burns, I don't know if you had a chance to see the fight between Burns and Usman. It was definitely an emotional loss for Burns. He started out in the fight really, really nicely. Seemed to get Usman in a little trouble early, but after that first half of the first round, Usman really started taking over, and I mean, just started really, really putting it on him in I believe in the second, definitely the second round. I don't remember. I'm having a brain freeze here as to how many rounds it went. But it was definitely an emotional loss for Gilbert Burns. So much so, almost wonder if there's going to be an emotional residual effect from having to lose like that to someone who was your former teammate, and and just really being picked apart in that second round. So with that in mind, taking a look at Stephen Thompson here. Stephen Thompson is actually coming in on an uptick. He's won his last 2 fights, both via decision. So I think the advantage here will be Stephen Thompson coming in, because again he has won 2 of his last 3. And yes, Gilbert Burns at one point before the loss to Usama was on a 6 fight win streak. But again, as I mentioned, this is going to be the best striker he has ever faced. So, but moving on to method percentage. So, method percentage, I use this as a way to gauge kind of, it tells me a lot about the fighter, as to how they arrived at their win or their loss. But by KO, do they have a high stoppage rate? Do they have a lot of decisions? This particular section is going to break that down for me in percentages. So this particular section is also color coded differently than some of the other sections we have here. The color code, it will light up the cell versus the font. So for instance, we'll start with the by loss, because Stephen Thompson has 75% for decision here. But the way I have it set up is any percentage over 70 in the by loss category will turn the cell red. Okay, if it's in the by win side, anything over 70% will light up the cell green. So with that being said, just digging into it and taking a look at it, looking at Gilbert Burns here, I can see his stoppage rate is 58%. That is a combination of his KOs as well as his submission. So 58%, it's okay. Looking at Stephen Thompson here, what jumps out again is kind of his decision rate. 55% of his wins come via decision. So then when you also look at the by loss rate for him, and then again, as we can see, the red cell rather, 75% of his decisions, 75% of his losses are decisions. That tells me that Stephen Thompson is a decision fighter. And, just taking a look, his last knockout was in 2016, and that was against Johnny Hendricks. So it has been a while since he's had a stoppage. So keep that in mind when if you're kind of doing the prop bets out there. And that's really what this section is great for, is because it helps me focus in on some of the better prop bets to play. If there's any inefficiencies, I can find it here. So again, it's also going to help with your over under. If I have 2 guys that are where both fighters have high decision rates, again, I know that it's probably safe at that point to bet the over, again, depending upon the matchup. But like I said, this section really is good for figuring out kind of the fight flow and how I think the fight is going to end based upon both fighters' percentage of victory and losses here. So moving on now to the metric, the striking and the grappling metrics here. As you can see right off the bat, without even really digging into it, Thompson has the advantage here, and that's not surprising. Again, being that he's probably he's the best striker in the welterweight division, one of the best strikers in the UFC. Outside of Adesanya. He has it for this particular matchup. He has the advantage in 5 out of 6 categories, and the only category that he doesn't have the advantage on would be striking accuracy. So just taking a look at some of these stats here. So if you're unfamiliar with the abbreviations are here on the right side of the box, as well as a description as to what it measures. So as we can see here for striking percentage, it's a combined value calculated by the 4 strikes. Note that's kind of off the I've zoomed the page in so we can see it better. It's kind of off the screen here. I apologize. But so you're going to have striking percentage. He's at 65% versus 53%. Significant strikes landed per minute, 4.2 to 3.2. Looking at significant strikes absorbed per minute, he's at 2.8. Gilbert Burns is at 3.4. And then strike and defense. So this is going to represent this number, and this number is going to represent how many of the strikes, the significant strikes defended. So again, how many of those strikes coming in does Stephen Thompson and Gilbert Burns defend? Stephen Thompson's at 58. Gilbert Burns is at 54. So looking at the grappling, the one thing that does stand out, the one thing that does jump out at me is if Gilbert Burns is going to win this, he's clearly not going to win this on his feet. The difference in the two, if you're unfamiliar with their styles, Stephen Thompson has a karate background, very wide stance. He likes to stand at long range to really utilize those kicks, frustrate guys, because they have to close the distance to get in on him, obviously. But he's able to disguise those kicks. He holds his hands low, so it's very difficult to kind of read his punches. It really, really frustrates fighters. If you watch the Vince St. Luque fight, where he really, really just frustrated him with everything he was able to do, his kicks, his punches. Now, I will say that if Gilbert Burns is able to get inside and get to mid-range, towards the end of mid-range, closer to close range, and he's in the close range, he does have the advantage. He has shown us that when he fought Woodley, he does have quick hands, especially early on in the fight. He caught Woodley with a nice punch, with a nice strike. He caught Damian Maia with one as well. So, the one thing about Gilbert Burns being a grappler, being one of the best BJJ guys in the UFC, he does have a tendency to fade late in fights. That was kind of the issue with the Usman fight. Looked great that first round, and then the wheels came off the cart after that. So, I mean, there are other fights, and then I'm having a brain freeze here trying to remember the names of the fighters, where literally in that third round he was kind of hanging on for dear life. This will be a 3-round fight, so all in all, I'm going to say Stephen Thompson has the advantage here, especially when you take a look at the takedown percentage, right? So it is Gilbert Burns averages 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, but his takedown accuracy is 35%. So Stephen Thompson's takedown defense is at 78%. So he's going to have to be better, him being Gilbert Burns, in his takedown accuracy if he's going to get Stephen Thompson to the ground. And it's a tall task. It's definitely going to be a tall task. Now, with that being said, Stephen Thompson has been caught. We've seen that. We've seen that in several of his fights where he gets caught once and he gets dropped right away. So that's something that I'm expecting Gilbert Burns to do, is to take his chances early, get inside, and really see if he can knock Thompson down early, and then use his grappling and his BJJ to win the match. So moving on right now to the final category, and that would be the DraftKings. The DraftKings is here. It's just to give an idea as to one, kind of the averages of the fighters in terms of obviously their salary, their average points per minute. And as we can see here, looking at Gilbert Burns, his average salary is $8,200. Average points is 76. His value overall is 1.04, which isn't bad. His points per minute is 2.96, and then his opponent's point per minute is 2.15. And then looking at Stephen Thompson, his average salary is $8,500. Average points is 79. Value is 0.66. His points per minute is 2.71, and then his opponent points per minute is 1.8. So, so I think really the difference in terms of the value here between these two guys is the fact that, as we talked about over here, Stephen Thompson has kind of become that decision fighter, so he's not getting the knockouts, and knockouts typically come within the first, second round of the fight. After that, the third round, the chance of a knockout really dwindle at that point. And so obviously more points for early round knockouts. But with that being said, like I said, I'm expecting Stephen Thompson to win this. Now, the only other thing that I will say is about Stephen Thompson is looking at his age. He is 38 years old, so we do want to take that in consideration, because at 38, the question is, we have seen fighters age overnight, and then when you look at Stephen Thompson's last couple of fights, he has walked away with some significant injuries. And so the question is, when do we see him kind of have that fight where it looks like he's aged overnight? And I mean, if he's the Stephen Thompson of his last 3 fights, he was looking great before he got caught with Pettis, and MMA, that's going to happen. But I think if he comes out being, the Stephen Thompson of the last couple of fights, I don't think there's much of a path to victory for Gilbert Burns. But I appreciate you guys taking the time. I hope this was very helpful. If you're interested in the spreadsheet, I do have it available. Look on the link below. And just to let you guys know, there are other I have other fighters here in the on this spreadsheet. You can click onto the fighter, it will automatically pull up their stats, and you're able to compare them to whom they're fighting. So again, you can get a quick breakdown. So all the research is done for you. You can pull it up. So if you're kind of like a casual fan, you're just looking for something bigger than the tail of the tape, this spreadsheet can do it for you. If you're a hardcore handicapper, this can save you time and trying to pull and look for the statistics, like the fight metrics and everything. And again, you're going to get the side-by-side comparison to their opponent. So again, I appreciate you guys taking the time. If you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on my next video.